Long ago, in a remote village lying between rolling hills and thick forests, the river Imoni flowed with a quiet, mysterious grace. Its waters were crystal clear, and its presence felt both welcoming and threatening, as if it held secrets beneath the surface. For generations, the villagers worshipped the river, believing it was home to Nea, the river goddess, a being of both beauty and power. Nea had protected the village for centuries, offering bountiful fish and fertile lands. In return, the villagers made offerings at the riverbank, leaving flowers, food, and small tokens. But there was something strange about Nea. Though she was revered, she was also feared. Legend had it that Nea desired something more than offerings. She longed for something no one could give her. Love. Not the admiration of the villagers, but true love, the kind that would make her feel human. And for centuries, she had been denied that wish. It was said that any man who caught Nea's eye would be drawn into the river, never to return. No one dared approach the river after sunset, for fear of the goddess's gaze. But the whispers of Nea's desires never faded, they lingered in the minds of the people, fueling both their devotion and dread. One fateful year, during the driest season the village had ever seen, the river's waters began to recede, revealing rocks that had never before been visible. The crops began to wither, and the fish grew scarce. The village elders gathered at the riverbank, throwing their most precious offerings into the water, but the river remained low. They feared Nea's wrath was upon them. In the midst of the growing panic, a young man named Cato arrived in the village. He was a traveler, an outsider who had wandered from village to village seeking purpose. His reputation preceded him. Tall, strong, and fearless, Cato had a charm that could sway even the most stubborn hearts. He had faced wild animals, bandits, and the unknown dangers of the forest without hesitation. Cato was unlike the villagers in every way. He had heard their tales of the river goddess, but he scoffed at the idea of a supernatural being controlling the fate of an entire village. A goddess who wants to be loved, he said to himself as he sat by the river one evening, watching the waters flow lazily past. I've heard of many things, but this is a story for children. As he stood up to leave, something unusual caught his eye, a shining figure beneath the surface of the water. For a moment, Cato thought he was imagining it, but the figure became clearer, rising slowly toward the surface. His heart raced, not out of fear, but out of curiosity. He stepped closer to the edge of the riverbank, looking into the water. The shining figure emerged fully a woman, beautiful beyond words, with long flowing hair that seemed to dance in the current. Her eyes, deep and piercing, locked onto his. Cato knew instantly who she was. Nea, the river goddess. But unlike the tales, she did not appear fearsome or vengeful. There was something hauntingly sad in her gaze, something that drew Cato in. Without thinking, he knelt by the water, entranced by the goddess's beauty. I see you've found me, Nea's voice echoed in his mind, though her lips never moved. It was soft, gentle, yet carried a weight of centuries. Cato's heart pounded in his chest, but he did not flee. Why have you shown yourself to me? He asked, his voice shaky. Nea's eyes glimmered with something he couldn't place. Because you are not like the others. You do not fear me. For a moment, the air between them felt heavy, charged with an unspoken tension. Cato felt drawn to her, as if the very air around them had changed. The night seemed to deepen, and the sound of the river filled his ears like a melody. You have wandered for so long, Cato, Nea whispered, her voice now soft and melodic. You've sought something in every place you've visited, but you've never found it. What if I could offer you something more than purpose? What if I could offer you everything? Her words sank deep into Cato's mind, and for the first time, doubt filled his heart. He had always believed he was in control of his own destiny, but something about Nea's offer was tempting. What do you mean by everything? Nea smiled, though it was a sad smile. Love, devotion, power, anything your heart desires. All I ask in return is your heart. Cato's chest tightened. The stories of the river goddess and her insatiable desire for love rushed back to him. You want me to love you? He asked, his voice barely a whisper. Not just love, Cato, Nea replied. I want your devotion, your soul. I want to be more than a goddess to you. I want to be loved like a woman. Cato stood frozen, torn between his disbelief and the strange pull he felt toward her. But you're a goddess. How can I give you what you want? Nea's eyes darkened. There are ways, Cato. But the question is, are you willing to give yourself to me? Cato's mind raced. The village depended on the river's waters, and if Nea was angry, she could destroy them all. Yet, part of him wanted to know what it would be like to love a being like her. Could she truly give him everything? Or was this some cruel trick? As Cato stood at the edge of the water, he realized that he had stumbled into something far more dangerous than he had ever imagined. His curiosity had led him here, but now he was trapped between desire and dread. The waters swirled around Nea's form, and her eyes never left his. Decide, Cato. Time is running out. And with that, the first seeds of his fate were planted, as the river whispered secrets only the brave would dare to hear. Cato spent sleepless nights by the river, haunted by Nea's words. The villagers continued their rituals, offering more and more to the river in hopes of appeasing the goddess, but the drought persisted. The waters had fallen to a dangerous low, and fear began to creep into the hearts of the people. They whispered of the end, of crops that wouldn't grow and of fish that wouldn't return. But Cato couldn't leave. Every night, he found himself drawn back to the riverbank, hoping to catch another glimpse of Nea. He couldn't explain the pull she had on him, something about her eyes, the sadness in her voice, the promise of everything he ever wanted. But what did he really want? He had wandered his whole life, never staying in one place for too long, never knowing where he truly belonged. The next evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, casting a blood-red glow over the river, Cato approached the water's edge once more. The river was still, unnervingly so, as if it were waiting. He knelt by the bank, his reflection wavering in the shallow water. You came back, a voice echoed in his mind, soft and familiar. Cato's heart raced. Nea emerged from the depths, her eyes glowing faintly in the fading light. She rose gracefully from the water, the droplets clinging to her like jewels. I couldn't stay away, Cato admitted, feeling the truth of his words. The power she held over him was undeniable. Nea smiled, though her expression was filled with sorrow. I knew you wouldn't. The air around them thickened, and Cato felt as though the world was closing in. It was just him and the goddess now, alone by the river, with only the sound of the water between them. The village, the drought, the dying crops, none of it mattered at this moment. I've thought about your offer, Cato said, his voice steady though his hands trembled. But I don't understand what you want from me. How can a goddess desire love from a mortal like me? Nea's eyes darkened, and the river seemed to ripple in response. I have lived for centuries, Cato. I have seen kingdoms rise and fall, and men live and die. But through it all, I have remained here, bound to this river, alone. The villagers worship me, yes, but they fear me more than they adore me. I am a goddess in name, but I long to be more. I want to know what it means to be loved, truly loved, without fear. And what happens if I give you what you want? He asked, trying to keep his voice steady. What happens to me? Nea's smile faded, replaced by a look of deep sadness. You would be mine, Cato. Bound to me for eternity. Your soul would become part of the river, and you would never leave. But in return, I would give you everything. You would never know pain, hunger, or fear again. You would be worshipped as I am, and we would be together, forever. Cato's blood ran cold. Bound to her for eternity. Part of the river? The weight of her words pressed down on him, and he suddenly felt as though he couldn't breathe. This was no ordinary love she sought, this was something far more dangerous. Something unnatural. I can't, Cato whispered, stepping back from the water's edge. I can't give you that. Nea's expression darkened, and for a moment, her beauty became terrifying. The waters around her began to swirl, and her voice, once soft, now echoed with an ancient power. You cannot deny me, Cato. You came to me willingly, and now you are bound by fate. You were chosen. Cato stumbled backwards, fear gripping him. Chosen? I never asked for this. Nia's eyes burned with an intense light, and the river began to churn violently. The trees around the riverbank swayed as if caught in an invisible storm. You think you can just walk away, she hissed, her voice no longer kind. I am the goddess of this river. You are mine, Cato, whether you wish it or not. Cato's heart pounded in his chest. He had underestimated her power, her desperation. She wasn't just some lonely spirit, she was a force of nature, and she would not be denied. He turned and ran, his feet slipping on the wet grass as the wind howled around him. Behind him, the river roared with fury, but he didn't look back. He ran and ran until he reached the village, collapsing in a heap outside the elders' meeting hut. The village was in chaos. The river had risen, flooding the crops and sweeping away entire sections of the farmland. The villagers were screaming, gathering their families and belongings, preparing to flee. The elders were in a heated discussion, debating whether to abandon the village entirely. Cato knew what had happened. Nne was furious, and now the village was paying the price. But what could he do? How could he stop a goddess? Desperate, Cato sought out the village elder, a wise man named Jabori who had lived through countless seasons of prosperity and drought. Elder Jabori, Cato panted, his chest heaving from the run, I need your help. Jabori's eyes narrowed as he studied the young man. You have been by the river, he said gravely. I warned you, Cato. The goddess is not to be played with. Cato shook his head, his hands trembling. I didn't know. I didn't understand what she wanted. Now she's angry, and the river is rising. She said I'm bound to her. What does that mean? Jabori's face grew pale. Bound? You've made a pact with the river goddess? I didn't agree to anything. Cato insisted. She wants my soul, my devotion. She said I was chosen. Jabori's expression turned grave. Then you are in great danger, Cato. The river goddess does not make idle promises. Once she chooses a mortal, she will stop at nothing to claim them. You must leave the village at once. Go far, far away from the river, and never return. Cato's heart sank. But what about the village? The river is flooding. She'll destroy everything. Jabori placed a hand on Cato's shoulder, his eyes filled with sorrow. The village will survive. We always do. But you cannot escape her wrath if you stay. Cato felt a cold chill run down his spine. There was no escaping Nne. She had marked him, and now, she was coming for him. Cato's heart raced as Jabori's words echoed in his mind. There was no escaping the river goddess once she had chosen you. The thought of fleeing the village felt like a betrayal, not just to the people who had taken him in, but to himself. He had never run from danger before, but this was unlike anything he had ever faced. As night fell, the village was a scene of desperation. Families gathered their belongings, heading towards the hills, away from the rising river. The once peaceful Imoni now raged like a beast unleashed, its waters clawing at the riverbank, swallowing trees, and threatening to consume the village. Cato stood at the edge of the village, watching the chaos unfold. He knew what had to be done, even if it terrified him. Running wouldn't save him or the villagers. He had to face Nne. She wouldn't stop until she had what she wanted, his soul. Determined, Cato turned away from the fleeing villagers and walked towards the river, his footsteps heavy with dread. The roar of the water grew louder with each step, and the air became thick with the scent of wet earth and impending doom. When he reached the riverbank, the water was nearly at his feet, crashing violently against the rocks. Nne, he shouted into the darkness. His voice barely rose above the sound of the raging river. I know you can hear me. Show yourself. The river stilled for a moment, as if holding its breath. Then, slowly, the water began to ripple, and Nne emerged from the depths, her form shimmering beneath the pale moonlight. Her eyes, once filled with longing, now blazed with fury. You came back, Nne said, her voice a mixture of anger and sadness. You think you can defy me, Cato? You think you can refuse the love of a goddess? Cato's hands trembled, but he stood his ground. I didn't ask for this, Nne. You can't force someone to love you. Nne's eyes flashed with hurt, and for a moment, her fury seemed to wane. You don't understand, Cato. I have lived in this river for centuries, watching the world pass me by. I have seen men and women fall in love, grow old, and die, but I have never known what it feels like to be loved. I was created to be worshipped, but I am alone. Always alone. Cato's heart hurt at her words. He could see the pain in her eyes, the loneliness that had driven her to this point. But he also knew that love could not be taken by force, it had to be given freely. Nia, I understand your pain, but this isn't the way. You can't claim someone's soul and call it love. It's not real. Nia's expression darkened, and the river began to churn once more. You think I don't know that, she cried, her voice trembling with emotion. But what choice do I have? The villagers worship me, but they fear me more than they love me. You, Cato, you could have changed that. You could have given me what I've longed for. But instead, you reject me, like all the others. The water surged towards Cato, and he staggered back, nearly losing his footing. Nia, stop, he shouted, panic rising in his chest. You'll destroy everything. I don't care. Nia screamed, her voice echoing through the night. If I can't have love, then let the river take everything. The water swelled around her, rising higher and higher, threatening to consume the village entirely. Cato knew he had only moments before the flood would wash away everything in its path. Desperate, he searched for a way to reach her, to calm the storm within her heart. Please, Nia, Cato pleaded, stepping closer to the raging water. You don't have to do this. I may not be able to love you the way you want, but that doesn't mean you have to destroy everything. There's still hope for you, for us. Nia's eyes flickered with uncertainty, her fury wavering for a brief moment. Hope, she whispered, as if the word was foreign to her. What hope is there for a goddess who is cursed to live in the river for all eternity? I can never leave this place, Cato. I can never know the life that mortals live. Cato's mind raced, searching for an answer. You're right, he said, his voice steady. You can't leave the river. But you can still be part of this world without taking it by force. The villagers don't need to fear you, they can love you. You can protect them, help them, and in time, they will come to love you for who you are, not just because you are a goddess. Nia's expression softened, and the raging waters around her began to calm. For the first time, Cato saw something other than anger or longing in her eyes. He saw doubt, but also a glimmer of hope. You believe they could love me? She asked, her voice trembling. Cato nodded. It won't be easy, but yes. You've already given them so much, Nia. They just need to see you not as something to fear, but as something to cherish. If you let them, they will come to love you. For a long moment, Nia was silent, her gaze locked on Cato's. The river stilled completely, the roaring floodwaters subsiding into a gentle current. The moonlight reflected on the calm surface, casting a soft glow over the scene. I have waited so long for love, Nia whispered, her voice filled with sorrow. I wanted it so badly that I let my desire consume me. I see now that I was wrong. Cato stepped closer to the water's edge, his heart racing. It's not too late, Nia. You can still make things right. Nia closed her eyes, and for a moment, Cato feared she would choose to destroy everything after all. But when she opened her eyes again, the anger was gone, replaced by a deep sadness. I will release you, Cato, she said softly. You are free from my claim. Cato felt a weight lift from his chest, but the relief was short-lived as Nia's form began to fade, her body dissolving into the river like mist. Nia, wait, he cried, reaching out to her. But Nia smiled, a bittersweet smile, as her form continued to fade. I cannot stay, Cato. My time here is over. The villagers deserve peace, and so do I. No. Cato shouted, panic rising in his throat. You don't have to leave. We can. Nia shook her head, her voice now barely a whisper. Thank you, Cato, for showing me that love is not something to be taken. Perhaps, in another life, I could have found it. And with that, Nia vanished completely, leaving nothing but the calm river behind. The night was still, and the village, now safe from the flood, remained quiet. Cato stood by the water's edge, staring into the place where Nia had disappeared. A part of him ached for her, for the sadness that had driven her to such desperate lengths. But he knew that, in the end, she had found peace, even if it wasn't the love she had sought. As dawn broke over the horizon, Cato turned and walked away from the river, knowing that he would carry the memory of Nia with him forever. The villagers would never know the full story of what had happened that night, but Cato would make sure that Nia's legacy was one of peace, not fear. And perhaps, in the gentle flow of the river Imoni, the spirit of the river goddess would live on, finally free from her longing.